2026 is the year of the Zelda 40th anniversary, and while I have started to touch in previous videos on the prospects for new Zelda, I wanted to spend a bit of time looking specifically at what the 40th anniversary is likely to hold in this dedicated video. For those who have missed my previous deep dives into the subject, my broad expectations are that 2026 will not have too major a Zelda title, but that 2027 will. This is because I think they will follow the strategy that led them to some success in 2023 of selling the existing titles in a series to the new movie audience prior to the movie release, and then ride the hype wave with a mid-year announcement going into their holiday season. This way, they maximize the use of their existing library and extend the time that Zelda is in the hype window. For the same logistical reasons, I anticipate that they will hold the anniversary buzz for September, thereby giving Mario a free reign over the summer and clearing the path for the Pokemon anniversary. For the 30th, they waited until September for an announcement, so even though they may acknowledge the Zelda year in February when the actual date is, I think it's most convenient for them to treat Zelda's anniversary as essentially Mario's anniversary plus 1 year. However, that's not to say that there won't be a huge amount of exciting things to discuss as the time approaches. Firstly, I understand that there are already leaks of Eiji Aonuma being spotted at Super Nintendo World, and a Zelda-themed expansion of a theme park feels like an obvious next step. Personally, I'd rather they went for a more rural setting, but it's probably very difficult to capture the feeling of a real world of Hyrule, especially given that they want this park to be replicated across the world in different locations. Plus, they don't actually want people exploring caves on their properties, as while it's dangerous to go alone, it's also dangerous for companies to invite lawsuits. Therefore, a Super Nintendo World Zelda add-on feels like a great 40th anniversary reveal. I also would expect Amiibo to continue to be in the spotlight. Exactly which Amiibo I wouldn't necessarily venture to guess, but I assume it will be characters that are highlighted in the movie, which probably would suggest some of the secondary characters in the Zelda lore who might necessarily become a bigger part of a future film. Beedle, Impa, Navi, even Dumpe might be plausible candidates, therefore. Another obvious low-hanging fruit feels like a Zelda concert. They've used concert footage on Nintendo today, and I feel like they'll want this to be something quite big. Okay, what about games though? Well, I've already discussed that the Zelda-aligned team most likely to have something imminent is Tantalus, the team behind Zelda Twilight Princess HD and Skyward Sword HD in 2016 and 2021 respectively. They are overdue, and the specific team haven't mostly received other credits, suggesting that they're still Nintendo aligned. The most likely title for them to bring over is Zelda A Link Between Worlds, which at over 12 years old is actually well overdue by Zelda and Nintendo standards. Even if Tantalus aren't working on that game though, there are other studios such as the Luigi's Mansion 2 HD team at Tantalus or Forever Entertainment who could also bring this game over, and it seems like such a low-hanging fruit that I would frankly be surprised if it didn't turn up sooner or later. The only question possibly is whether they would like to add on A Link to the Past as a complete remake, which also would make it a pretty exciting proposition for the anniversary. Now, if Tantalus aren't on Link Between Worlds, I think the most likely option is in fact Ocarina of Time, but in this case, it would become a more ambitious Tantalus project, but a less ambitious project overall than many are expecting. This would have huge implications for the rest of Zelda's release schedule. You see, my baseline assumption is that they will have films that broadly feed into specific games. A first film which concentrates on Link's childhood and growing up, drawing from Ocarina of Time. A second film which deals with a dark world or Twilight Realm which would tie into Twilight Princess, and a third climactic film, possibly in a ruined version of the kingdom after the events of the second movie, which would tie into a Wild era title, or I guess if the next mainline title is set in a different location, perhaps they would like to have Link and Zelda exploring a completely new realm. Therefore, I expect Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess especially to be timed with the films in mind, and while the next mainline Zelda title will also probably slipstream a film if possible. However, Nintendo may take the view that they don't want their big post-film game to be a tribute act, but something brand new. They've been happy to launch consoles with Zelda remakes before, as recently as Link's Awakening on the Switch Lite in fact, but I think they also want to convey not just that the games have a great legacy, and dare I say legend, but that they have a bright future as well. Given that I would only expect only one mainline Zelda game from the Fujibayashi team during the next 8 years that the film trilogy is expected to release in, that either means splinter teams or spin-offs from the core game. I do think there is a logic to a splinter version of the Wild games utilizing that huge world one more time, but with the Fujibayashi crew focusing their attention elsewhere. One option that has seemed like an obvious move for a long time is a multiplayer title that utilizes the sandbox of Breath of the Wild almost like Fortnite, with people cooperating and competing across the same map. With Game Chat, the potential was already trialled in Mario Kart World of people being able to meet up and go exploring together, but the potential is surely far more huge in the world of the Wild Hyrule, and this might make a stronger 2027 game, especially since it's been a long time, not since 2015's Triforce Heroes, that they've dabbled in multiplayer Zelda. Now, I appreciate that there are difficulties with this, particularly in terms of how arrow shooting takes place, but I'm sure this is something that can be ironed out. Now, an Ocarina remake or a multiplayer Wild game, which of these you think would be a bigger deal probably dictates which would be the 2027 title they would opt for. I've been down on seeing Ocarina in 2026, but it feels far more likely as a possibility if they have something else up their sleeve for 2027. And one other thing I've been considering recently is that Nintendo really don't like going back and fundamentally altering their old games. If they remake, they stay faithful even to the original game's quirks. Skyward Sword couldn't be more opposite to the new Zelda philosophy, but they stuck with what the game was. Therefore, a faithful, if graphically lavish, Ocarina with the Tantalus team doing a brilliant job of making it a Switch 2 ready title, but not really fundamentally changing the core gameplay mechanics, feels like it could work as a Nintendo Switch 2 title, possibly as soon as this year. Equally, if the Wild spin-offs were smaller in scale, it might make more sense to have for 2026 and to promote ahead of the movie as a vehicle for Game Chat. I know a lot of people roll their eyes at whenever Game Chat is mentioned, but it's a major part of the console that I think Nintendo will want to continue to try to leverage, and Zelda is going to be one of the big opportunities for them to do so. It would also allow them to put Zelda herself at the centre of another title, as she has been for the last 2 entries. I suspect they want to have a depth of content behind both Zelda and Link as key characters as they enter the movie period. Now, there is another possibility, which is that they merge the 2 projects. They do Ocarina of Time plus Game Chat Zelda. Remember, Link's Awakening was an idea that followed on after the decision to try a Dungeon Maker. Ultimately, I don't think this is likely because Ocarina of Time is such a huge and consequential title that it could easily stand alone, but it's something that is worth considering at least. Let's say then that this September they decide to announce Ocarina of Time for 2026 and A Link Between Worlds for early 2027, saving Game Chat of the Wild for 2027 as a June surprise. This would be a very strong offer for the anniversary, and I wouldn't necessarily expect very much more. That said, though, I maintain that Zelda has a lot of spin-off potential. I've talked before about how I would love to see a Ring Fit Adventure sequel that uses the Zelda IP to have you jog through Hyrule and use fitness skills to battle bokoblins and moblins, and I think this is a very good fit for the kind of audience they might bring in through the movies. Also, they've done games like Wii Music before, and Zelda has a big musical connection, so something on the casual end would make sense as well. Also, we really shouldn't rule out a game app as well, or at least some other kind of smartphone device app. Zelda Note only worked with a game, but we've seen with Pikmin Bloom that Nintendo aren't yet done leveraging smart devices as a way to bring people into their IP. It's also the case that these games would probably be easier to develop at speed. If they indeed are working on a full Ocarina of Time remake, a Twilight Princess remake, a Game Chat Zelda, and a new mainline entry, these are a lot of irons in the fire. Will all of them be ready, or any of them be ready, for 2026? And even if they are, do they need such big titles for 2026? They have Pokemon Gen 10 and likely a major Mario 3D game in this year, and ahead of the 2023 Mario movie, Nintendo actually did the opposite from what you might expect and held back significantly on Mario content in the year ahead. This movie will be, for millions of people, their first substantial experience of Zelda, or at least their first for a very long time. Nintendo will want to sell them Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, Link's Awakening, Echoes of Wisdom, Hyrule Warriors, their huge back catalogue in other words. This is why I see the games that they will add in 2026 as being additions to the catalogue rather than major tentpoles in their own right. For this reason, I don't expect Ocarina of Time this year, as even if it is the Tantalus game, I think they might hold it. But if it is released this year, it suggests a huge degree of confidence in what is coming in 2027, which would be exciting not just for the fact of the Ocarina of Time game itself, but also for what might follow. And I don't expect a fully original Zelda this year either. But I would expect some kind of spin off, which, yes, could include the multiplayer title, but which would probably be something quite left field. My favourite suggestion in this category was from the Sunny in the comments recently, who suggested Zelda 40 Swords, which would be an incredible Nintendo Switch Online edition and exactly the kind of anarchic, online focused implementation that Nintendo might want for the Zelda anniversary. Before I move on to specific forecasts, a few words about the many things that I haven't mentioned here. With Echoes of Wisdom only dropping in 2024, I think a new Grezzo-developed top-down Zelda is unlikely. Now, 2027 is possible as a window for them, especially if it's a remake, and given that Echoes of Wisdom was quite a way delayed from the Link's Awakening game, meaning that it's potentially the case that Echoes of Wisdom was done for some time. But I don't necessarily think that they want to put a 2D game following a major movie unless they either redo the original Link to the Past or maybe even the very first game. I also don't see Wind Waker HD, Phantom Hourglass, or Spirit Tracks returning this year. I think they want to get behind the presentations of Zelda that are most appealing to the likely film audience, and that means Toon Link is probably going to be retired for a time. These games will be great as Nintendo Switch Online benefits, and I'm sure one day Nintendo will decide to revive them, but I suspect it won't be this decade. I also, for reasons I've talked about above, don't expect to see anything from Twilight Princess this year. So, as I try to put hard numbers to these forecasts, at this point I would say the following likelihoods seem right to me. 90% a Zelda anniversary focus in a direct or similar presentation during 2026. 70% a Zelda theme park announcement during 2026. 70% a Zelda concert announcement during 2026. 70% new Zelda amiibo during 2026. 70% some kind of Zelda spin-off, including a multiplayer game, announced during 2026. 50% Zelda A Link Between Worlds is announced during 2026. 30% Zelda Ocarina of Time is announced during 2026. 30% an Impa amiibo releases during 2026. 10% any re-release of Wind Waker, Phantom Hourglass, or Spirit Tracks during 2026. 10% a Navi amiibo during 2026, and 10% any kind of re-release of Zelda Twilight Princess during 2026. Now do check out my previous Zelda deep dives on screen right now, and thank you so much for everyone who watches. Do consider checking out the Patreon below, which really does help keep the channel on the road, but irrespective, I really appreciate you watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time for another Nintendo Forecast.